So in the previous video, we saw how we can arrange views linearly using the linear layout. Now, oftentimes we feel the need to have more complex layouts than arranging the elements in a linear fashion, in which case using linear layout can be a bit difficult. For such cases, we can use relative layout. Let's see how we can use that. So this time I will create a new layout just to show you how it's done. So go here in your resource folder, layout, and then if you right click here, new, and select this layout resource file option. When you select it, a pop-up will appear. Here you can add the name of your layout. I will just say activity second, let's say. And for root element, since we are gonna work with the relative layout, so I can select relative layout here. So select this, press OK. And then the Android Studio will create a layout for us with the relative layout as the root layout. So now if you go to the design, there's nothing there. To start with, let's drop two buttons in here. So one, and I will drop the second button in here as well. And as you can see, there's just one button here. That's because the buttons are overlapping. There are two buttons. If you go check out in the code, there are two buttons, but as I said in my previous video, by default, the views are added to the top left corner. And unlike in linear layout, where the elements are arranged vertically or horizontally based on the orientation, here you have to define the relative position of the views. So you can basically, for every view in the relative layout, you can define their relation with respect to the other sibling or with respect to the parent layout, parent relative layout as well. Now, what does that mean? I will show you in a while. So Android Studio has created these IDs for us already. We can just use that. So let's say we want to show this button on the right side of this button. So how do we do that? We will go here and we can start typing to right off, and this layout underscore to right off is a property coming from the relative layout. And here we can put this ID. So we can say add plus ID, and then the ID of the button, this button. So here we have actually defined this button to be on the right of this button. So if you go check out the design, now you can see that this button is on the right of this button. Now the Android Studio is giving us some warning. That's just because it's better to use to end off as compared to right off. It's just for different language settings. But yeah, this is how it looks. Now let's say I want to show this button below this one. I don't want to show this button on the same line. So then we can say that we can say below add plus ID, and then we can add button this ID here as well. Then if we go to the design, then we can see that this button, we have defined two relations, two constraints on it. So we have defined this button to be on the right and then on the bottom of this button as well. And as you can see, both of those apply here, and both of those come from the relative layout. Now here I have defined the position of this button in relation to this one, but you can also define the position of a view inside a relative layout in relation to the parent layout itself as well. Now what does that mean? Let's say we want to place this button in the center horizontally. So we don't want it like that there in the top left corner. We want it here in the horizontal center of the main layout. So in that case, you will go here, start typing center. It should suggest you center horizontal. So this property layout underscore center horizontal, and set it to true. And then if we go check it, we can see that this button is in the horizontal center of the main layout. And you can see that this constraint is still valid. Just we have defined the relative position of this button, and no matter where this button goes, it will stay on the right and below this button. Now let's say instead of horizontal center, we want this button to be in the center of the main screen. In that case, we can just say center in parent, true. And parent layout is this one. So if we go look at the design, we can see that this is in the center, and then this button is by there as well. So that's how you use relative layout. You define the relations. You define the relations on the views. So you can say that, okay, I need this button to be on the left of that one, on the right of that one, on the top or on the below of the other one, and such. And also you can define relations of the views with the parent layout as well. So you can say that I want this to be in the center, in the horizontal center, in the vertical center, or so on. Also, one thing you can do is that you can align it. You can set it to be at the right or left of the parent as well. So let's say if I align it to the parent end, then let's see, then we can see that this is at the end of parent. So this is at the right end of parent, and the other button was supposed to be on the right of that one, so that got knocked out of the screen. Now I want to design this view with you. So let's see how we can do this one. You can see that this can be designed with the linear layout because these are like arranged linearly, but then there are these two elements for which we will have to define a separate linear layout. So if we had to do this layout using linear layouts, we will have one main layout which will arrange the elements vertically, and then for these two we will have one linear layout within that will arrange these elements in the horizontal fashion. So you can see that there's already nesting there, but in relative layout we don't really need to do that. We can arrange this just with one relative layout as a parent layout. So the first element there was the edit text. So let me just remove these. Edit text, and I will define the width to be match parent and the height to be wrap content, and then the hint to be name, then close the tag. Then I will define the second edit text. This will be the edit text for this street address. For this I will define the width to be match parent and height to be wrap content, and then we can define the hint to be street address, and then I will close this. Now if we go look at the design, we can see that the views are overlapping. That's because I haven't defined this to be below this one. And in order to do that, first I will define an ID here. Let's name it name edit text, name ET, short for edit text. And then here we can say that this is below name edit text. And now you can see that this street address appears below name. Now we also need this postcode over there, so let's have an edit text for that. Width, in this case I will give it a constant width, so let's say 120 dp should be enough for postcode field, and height will be wrap content, and then hint postcode. Then let's close this tag. Now go have a look. You can see that this is appearing at the top left as well. That's because we haven't defined its relative position. So this postcode should be below the name field, but on the right side of the street address, and street address should be on the left. So what we can do here, first we can define it to be below name edit text field. This is the ID for this field. And then we can define it, we can constrain it to be at the end of the parent. So we can say align parent end true, which means that it will be here at the end of the parent. So on this end. This is the same as saying align parent right. That becomes, it is a bit more intuitive in this scenario. But it's the same, right and end is the same, especially if you're not supporting multiple languages. So that's there, but now you can see that this seems to be overlapping with this one. That's because we haven't defined this to be on the left of this one. So we want the street address to be on the left of postcode. So we will go here and we will say to left of plus ID, and we haven't defined the ID for this one. So let's first define the ID for this one. ID, I will just call it postcode edit text. And I will copy this ID over there. So now we have defined this edit text to be on the left of postcode. Now let's check our design. And now you can see that the street address is to the left of the postcode. Now lastly, we have this register button that's below on the right side as well. So let's have a button here. Width should be wrap content, height should be wrap content as well. And then the text should be register. And I think at this point you should be able to guess where this button should appear. It should appear on the top left. And in this case, we have to define this button below the second row. So we can define it below this one or this one. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. So in this case, we have defined the ID for this one already. So let's define this one to be below ID postcode edit text. Let's go check our design. So yeah, this is below that field, and in order to align it to this end, we can just say align parent end true, and then it will appear here. And lastly, just to give it some padding so that it's not too close to the edge, we'll put some padding over here. And now it looks like the design that we want to do. So we have a name field, we have address, postcode, and register, and we did it all with the relative layout. And as you can see, there is no nesting. There are just these 4 fields over here. Now, one thing before we go is that by default, when you place an edit text, it accepts anything. So it accepts numbers and special characters and everything. This is fine for street address and name, but it's not fine for postcode. In case of postcode, it should show the number keyboard like this. It should not allow like special characters to be placed over there. And this postcode will not work like that. And that's a very simple thing to do. You go here, you define the input type of this edit text field, and you just say number. And that's it. That will be it. Now if we run this application, actually I have to put this in the layout. So in here, I will reference this new layout that I created, second activity, then I will run it. And here you can see that we have our layout. If we click here, we click here, it shows the numbers. So that was it. That's how you use relative layout. In the next video, I will show you an even more powerful layout called constraint layout. Thanks for watching the video. If you have any questions, if you feel like I have missed something, please ask me in the comments. I will try my best to answer them, and I will see you in the next video.